The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has announced a surprise visit to Britain this morning where he will meet with the Prime Minister.
In a tweet announcing the trip, he called Rishi Sunak his friend and said the pair would hold substantive negotiations.
The Prime Minister says the UK will sustain its support for the war-torn country, and this is a crucial moment for its resistance.
Well, joining us now for more on this is GB News' Head of Digital News, Dan Falvey. And Dan, this will be the fourth country in Europe that the President will visit in the last few days. Shame we didn't time it to coincide with Eurovision on Saturday night. But on a serious note, what are these substantive negotiations likely to be based around?
So we know that Ukraine is planning to launch this counter-offensive against Russia over the coming months, and we've seen that over the last few days. What Zelensky's hoping to do is help continue to build that coalition across Europe and continue to keep up the pressure and the ante on countries to keep giving their support. It's worth noting there's differences in language here because Zelensky's calling it substantive negotiations. Number 10 have suggested that this is more of a catch-up, that this isn't going to be these big negotiations. I think what we're seeing from the Ukrainian President there is exactly trying to keep that pressure on the United Kingdom. But what Rishi Sunak has said this morning is we must not let them down. He knows that there's a lot that we need to do to help keep up that pressure because Ukraine are starting to make those advances on Bakhmut, which is where we're seeing the next big part of this war in Ukraine. And we've promised that we'll continue to give them air defences in the months ahead, which is something that Zelensky's been calling for since the start of the war.
And I wonder what we can expect in terms of optics today. The last time that Zelenskyy was in the UK, of course, the Prime Minister was in a civvies, wasn't he? They went down to a big warehouse, a military warehouse, I think an aircraft hangar or something, and there they were in green. But the Prime Minister's put out a statement in the last few moments saying the UK is sustaining our support to Ukraine from tanks to training, ammunition to armoured vehicles, and this message of solidarity will ring loud in all of my meetings with fellow world leaders in the days ahead, because of course there's the G7 later on this week in Japan. So as you say, just kind of underlining what's already been offered.
Yeah, but this is a big week for the Prime Minister as well because of that international trip. He's got not only Ukraine, he's dealing with UK on the world stage. You know, we've seen a lot over the last few weeks when it comes to talk about migration, etc. This is the Prime Minister looking outwards. we're talking about what's happening in the rest of the world and what's happening in Ukraine. This is the Prime Minister having to prove that he can perform on both fronts.
Boris Johnson would always sort of relish a visit or a conversation or kind of a political bounce, wouldn't he, from interaction with Zelenskyy. Do you think Rishi Sunak can benefit from the same? Because all the papers and all of our discussion up until we heard about this surprise visit this morning have been on Suella Braverman kind of breaking rank and giving this sort of controversial speech today.
Yeah, as you said, I think Boris Johnson always took a sigh of relief sometimes when it came to the Ukraine situation because it did allow attention to be moved on to something that he was more comfortable talking about. The UK has been very strong on Ukraine, and Zelenskyy has been very clear that the UK has been one of the strongest countries in supporting it. So I think Sunak will continue to push that message hard and hope that it can distract from some of his problems on his backbenches.